visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward and our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Twists and turns in our local narratives, in our local stories. It's actually quite easy to pick up where I left off yesterday, but there's other stories to get to. Of course, there's the whole situation with US-Venezuela, which is, in my opinion, eerily quiet. We'll see if anything progresses, because I've reached the point where there's a part, I won't say it's all of me, but there's a part that would just like to get to the end. Whatever the end is, the end could be the Americans sail home and do nothing. The end could be they do whatever it is they decided they were going to do. But drawing it out and drawing out the uncertainty to some extent, I don't necessarily know what the point of it is. Makes me wonder if there's indecisiveness and hesitation there. But there's other aspects we'll get into shortly. And today also, I will take a preliminary look at the government's revitalization plan. It's very ambitious, and it comes with questions, not necessarily the finance question that people have been asking, or at least how it's been framed so far, but rather it all comes back down to one of what probably is a long list, but one of the bugbears of TNT society, particularly, of course, in the government and government assets and services, and that is with regards to maintenance. That's the thing that a lot of public officials don't really even pretend to give a lip service explanation. The more assets that a government has, the more things it creates and builds and opens and the like, the more it has to maintain. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, just ask Olympic facilities around the world. What happens to these grandiose displays of sport when the Olympics are over? The practical value of these facilities moving forward, you would think, oh, now there's a pool and a this and a that. No. And now, this is one of the things we have to ask ourselves, because one of the maintenance bugbears, I guess you could say, or at least white elephants, culturally, is Napa. It's difficult to clean, probably difficult to maintain, it's not a standard shape and the like, and wasn't necessarily built fit for purpose. So that is an example of what can go wrong without it being catastrophically wrong in some sense, and we'll utilize a lens like that to scrutinize the government's revitalization plans. Although I will say up front, I'm not necessarily against it, and I think I'm a net positive believer in the general idea, right? And it's not that I have issues that I want to see changed, but I do have questions, because this is a lot. This is potentially a great leap forward. And if you know history, the great leap forward ended up being a net negative because it wasn't necessarily going forward, right? Sometimes if you're too ambitious, you could get caught up in that. But before we get there, there's a few things to get through first. First of all, what is probably just something that the government had to do, go through the motions, make an attempt. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Try to go to the Privy Council to get, I guess, permission to appeal the $20 million judgment that favored the 9 defendants with the murder case of Vindra Naipal Kulman. Now, essentially, the Court of Appeal said, no, you can't go to the Privy Council. So they're basically going to the Privy Council not to appeal the situation, but to ask for the right to appeal. Now, ironically, the dissenting opinion in that Court of Appeal decision was the current Chief Justice. Don't necessarily know to what extent that may play into the situation or not. The thing is, it's a very interesting stand that the majority decision, to me as a layman, took, in that, well, it's not apparent that the government would have won and the defendants would have lost, so you can't appeal. And I don't understand that, to be honest. It doesn't mean that there isn't a chance that the government would win. It doesn't mean that there's a zero chance for the government to win. That if the majority judges in the judgment, in the decision, in the government's initial attempt to appeal what happened, if the reasoning is, well, the government wasn't guaranteed to win. Yeah, but the government wasn't guaranteed to lose. The defendants aren't guaranteed to win. So why couldn't we have just appealed the decision? $20 million isn't a small amount of money. Also, the fact of the matter is, again, as a layman, it seemed as though the whole process was not done properly. So can we say that appealing it will somehow be a miscarriage of justice for these individuals? Innocent or guilty, the point is the state didn't show up at a critical point in the process. So we're not saying, well, you know, they're one doing the process, but now we're trying to appeal on a technicality. What we're trying to appeal is a technicality. The flip side to this whole situation is this, however. While I understand the government has to try, because we are pinching pennies and $20 million is a lot of money. I've said this, I have found it very interesting how much tens of millions, millions, and hundreds of thousands this government seemingly will prioritize. I do find, though, that they probably should have started this whole thing earlier. But anyway, with regards to this appeal or getting permission to appeal this process, why didn't they? I don't know. I don't know. But at the end of the day, change of government, because some people might think, oh, the government changed, so they have a right to appeal it. Change of government means nothing here. The unfortunate reality is, if the court wanted to penalize the state because the state didn't do its job, if that's the reason why, I can't necessarily, as a layman, disagree with that. If the court thought the state, you didn't do your job, now you want to come do your job after the fact, that's undue burden on the defendants of the case. All right. And this is one of those things where, unfortunately, the current government is going to have to live with one more thing that the previous government did, which is something that also applied to the PNM. Don't get me wrong. And we kind of need to understand one of the issues where when we think politics is a zero-sum game, you have to lose so I win, is we get into these he said, she said situations, under you this happened and under you that happened. And we don't really consider the fact that at the end of the day, we could count the years of the PNM and the UNC, but the overall title is Government of Trinidad and Tobago. And the fact that we've allowed it to become so combative means continuity of governance that will go throughout whichever term of office and whichever administration by whichever party, in order to ensure stability, well, that's something that, if we're not careful, will go disappear in a puff of logic, and then we'll get a situation where we will never progress once somebody loses an election. So then we'll say, oh, well, you know, we have to give so-and-so a second term, a third term. And if we don't like it, then we'll be committing ourselves in a direction we don't like. That will be difficult to reverse, which is the whole reason why elections are not every 15 years, they're every 5 years. The inability to have consideration for the fact that, A, sometimes just because it's the other guy's project doesn't mean we wash our hands of it. But that's how ugly our politics has gotten. And to some extent, you see that in other parts of the world. That said, from what I understand, the then AG, I won't even say his name at this point because that's just piling all, but the then AG really mucked up in more ways than one. Now, with regard to that Venezuela-US situation, there was a summit, I believe that there was a summit this weekend with the European Union, Latin American, Caribbean nations, right? Again, this whole thing about to meet on Sunday to strengthen ties over the US military operations targeting drug-carrying vessels. That's the report. Although it was reported that certain leaders of the EU, particularly the European Commission President and German Chancellor, were not present, which makes me think, once again, this is all about international politics. They weren't present because war in Ukraine, and let's not piss off the Americans because we need them for that. Now, at the end of the day, it goes back to the president of Brazil. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. He has urged Latin American nations to prevent conflict in Venezuela. He told reporters he also urged Trump during their last meeting last month in Malaysia to follow the example of former US President George W. Bush, who participated in efforts to pacify Venezuela following a 2002 coup attempt against then President Hugo Chavez. Pacify Venezuela. Not necessarily like how you pacify Israel. Just saying. I told Trump that Latin America is a region of peace, reportedly said by the Brazilian president. And our government essentially had a response to that, which at this point now, a lot of people, because of their biases, they're going to either say our government is right or everybody else is right. And not realize to some extent, at this point, we're just arguing over semantics and the definition of things and what things means. What does the zone of peace mean? The people who are against American action are basically saying the zone of peace does not count death and destruction via crime. Whereas TNT's government made that position, made the counterpoint to that position, their position, right? Now, the parliamentary secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nicholas Morris, he said the country no longer exists in a zone of peace because of the serious impact of drug and human trafficking across the region. He told delegates that while Trinidad and Tobago values peace as a supreme asset, its reality over the past 2 decades has been shaped by organized crime and its social and economic consequences. It's a very direct answer. And now the question is, who is correct? Because this is one of the things people have not realized. Zone of peace is, like many things with regard to linguistics, something we made up. And the only thing that matters is if we agree what the meaning is. Whatever we agree the meaning to be, it is what it is. And if we disagree what the meaning is, we could debate the semantics till the cows come home. It's not really going to be useful. But that's where a lot of ideological debate ends up. Not what is good and what is bad, but, well, what does this mean? And I want it to mean this, and you want it to mean that in order for us to win an argument. Because we're not necessarily trying to figure out the truth and the correct way. No, we're trying to win a debate. And that's, to some extent, what's going on here. People are trying to win a debate. Rather than saying, okay, Trinidad and Tobago, what are your concerns? This is how we compromise and rectify them without potentially, hopefully, undermining our point that we don't like what's going on. But a lot of the debate is done at very surface level. And also, it is fueled in part by bad faith actors that don't really know what they're talking about. And I don't mean people like Mr. Abdullah. But there are a lot of academics who said things from the very beginning that just, it reeked of not even doing basic research into Trump's view on Venezuela. I won't give the example that comes to mind because I don't want to call out said individual nor give that person any consideration. Yes, there are those who have been looking at this situation for a long time, so they have a very deep informed opinion. And then you have the ones who want, you know, to just give a soundbite, who are kind of mixed in, hiding amongst the well-intentioned ones. And it's obscuring the truth. And then, of course, you have all the agendas of the various countries. Whether they're for or against American action, we all have our own agendas. That further obscures the truth. And instead of having a mature discussion of significance with the intent to get to a resolution peacefully, we just have a debate on semantics. What does a zone of peace mean? Because to be fair to the government of the day, if they want to say, we don't feel like we're in a zone of peace, so don't tell us we're in a zone of peace. Because here's the other thing. By what rights do the other countries have to say, no, it's a zone of peace, you can't do anything here? Now, granted, America's justification has a lot of holes. They're not actually preventing drug smuggling to America in so much as they're preventing drug smuggling through the Caribbean up to Europe. But it's not as though there isn't drugs there. So now it's kind of iffy, right? It's not necessary. I mean, if your goal is to deal with drug smuggling in Europe, say so. Don't say it's for America, where most of the drugs coming into America ain't going through the Caribbean. There's Mexico, there's Canada. It's coming from China, etc., etc. But to say that they're not actually dealing with drug smuggling, well, no one actually has said that. No one could claim that. And more importantly, it's not like the Venezuelans are actually looking to say a lot of things to directly claim ownership and nationality of these boats. They're very careful with what they say. In fact, they're trying to say all these smuggling is from Trinidad to Venezuela with regards to guns and other contraband in order to aid potential terrorism in Venezuela. That's a claim they made even before Trump started doing what it is that they're doing. We don't feel like we're in a zone of peace. How is it that the Eastern Caribbean owns the Southern Caribbean international waters to make that declaration? And this is where I think people need to understand something. You can make all the declarations you want. The only thing that matters is your ability to enforce it, whether economically, diplomatically, or militarily. The first and the last, not really available to the countries in the region that are making a fuss about this. Sorry, but the second, diplomatically, I guess that's what they're trying to do. But again, the premise of a zone of peace by itself, all right, take it further. Don't just say that. Not even really define zone of peace until TNT challenged it. Then all of a sudden it's like, no, 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 we have to be specific. It doesn't matter how many people the criminals kill, we're a zone of peace. Haiti? Nope. Haiti's in a zone of peace. Anyone wants to try to convince me that Haiti is peaceful? So, one thing though out about this, there was of course the vigil over the matter. The joint trade union movement publicly supported the vigil. The Prime Minister described that situation as a dismal failure. Now, yesterday, I called out the population. If you believe in this thing, come out. Don't stay home and just, talk amongst yourselves. Oh, the Americans are doing, how bad is this? Why is our Prime Minister great? No, if you believe strongly about it, you need to come out publicly and say so. But what I didn't do is call it a dismal failure. First of all, did not the union support the government? So I don't understand. As an exercise of leadership, it works both ways. When Venezuela insulted the Prime Minister, what did I say? I said, she is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I am a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Most of you who are watching, I assume, are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Some might be living abroad, but for the most part, you're citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, or you identify with Trinidad and Tobago. So we should not take kindly or find it acceptable for a Venezuelan government official to say disparaging remarks about our Prime Minister that has nothing to do with the situation at hand. Whatever her personal rumored proclivities are, they directly have nothing to do with this whole situation, nothing to do with our relations with Venezuela. It is literally a personal attack. There's no other way that I could think to frame it. It's a personal attack just to make our Prime Minister look bad. It works both ways too. Because again, in that situation, what did I say? She's our Prime Minister. Whether you voted for her or not, she's your Prime Minister. As long as you count yourself as a Trinbagonian, she's your Prime Minister. So that means, regardless of whether those people that wanted to have a vigil about US-Venezuelan conflict, whether they agreed with their Prime Minister or not, because it's a democracy, she's your Prime Minister, but you have the right to disagree with her. And to me, as the Prime Minister of those people, not just your supporters, to call the event a dismal failure, as though now you are gearing up the political machine to fight domestically this situation, as though it is another political opponent, like, say, the opposition party or whoever else, is a mistake. It is an error in leadership. It shows business as usual thinking, politics of the day thinking, not leadership. In that, these people are free to disagree with you. Do not say, oh, well, the event was a dismal failure, I'm not worried. What you could have said was, well, everyone is free to have their own opinion, but it seems as though the opinions expressed by this vigil is not that which is held by a large majority of the population. Therefore, I believe I have the mandate from the people to move ahead as I've been moving ahead, because the scourge of crime that threatens this nation is serious enough to warrant an extension to the SOE and continues to put fear in our citizens, and we are attempting to put an end to it. And reiterate the point that Trinidad and Tobago's official position is not to support regime change. But this is what she said: the majority of citizens are fed up with gimmickry and fakeness masking a civil society, particularly civil society groups that have been in hibernation for the last 10 years. Now, I don't necessarily know if they've been in hibernation for the last 10 years. They might have been just ineffective. But then again, the opposition for the last 10 years was not particularly effective either, right? So, again, it seems like this is one of the things I don't understand. you could, behind the scenes, dislike various NGOs, civil society organizations, advocacy groups, because you think their opinions are rubbish. You could dislike them all you want. You can't necessarily do that publicly, because as the leader, how do you then lead everybody in the future if you mark a clear line of distinction emotionally, philosophically, ideologically, whenever the mood basically suits you? There are subtleties to leadership that seemingly is beyond the capacity of our political system, and thus it is not practiced. Therefore, our politicians are not proficient. Therefore, things like this happen. A lot of people might not necessarily see it how I see it. I think this is a big mistake, but we won't necessarily see how it will impact our political discourse moving forward. We tend to have an inability to really understand things unless there's a direct attribution, almost as though the vast majority of us have not gone beyond the point of being school children, where you have to have the punishment or the consequence directly tied, otherwise you'll be totally oblivious. Because again, is it that things are moving in a different direction? And I'll just end this part of the show with this. The president of the PSA has expressed her quote-unquote annoyance over what she described as the chief personnel officer's delay in coming to the bargaining table to honor the government's promised 10% salary increase for public servants. She told one media house, "Something doesn't seem right." I wrote them last week. I proposed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week. I have not received an acknowledgement of the letter. I have not received any correspondence indicating any of the dates I have proposed to meet. But I intend to press on them a bit this week to ensure that we get a date, because at this point it seems as though the CPO office is now stalling to come to the table and offer 10%. Because, dare I say, the PSA did not care about what the right thing was. They cared about the 10%. They cared about scuttling the WASA report. Not cared about fixing WASA, not cared about pointing out whatever inaccuracies in the WASA report was there, not caring about modifying the WASA restructuring plan. No, they just wanted the whole thing ended. Amongst other things, because they like the status quo. They want the status quo, and politically they thought that they found a partner that will give them what they want. The problem is, to be fair to the previous administration, when they said, we can't do that, it wasn't necessarily a lie. What did I say from the very beginning? The agenda of the unions and the agenda of the government are not the same. They came together for an election, but at the end of the day, their interests are not the same. They will never be the same. At times it will meet, and then it will diverge again. It will never run coherent. It will never be the same thing beyond just flashes, beyond just special circumstances, because the interests of the unions are to get more money for their members. Not to improve the working conditions of their members, at least in some unions. Look, I believe Martin Lumpkin tried to do that, and what he was voted out on was the money. That's my read on it. That's my opinion. They wanted the money. As soon as the election happened, what did Tutor, the incoming head of Tutor, said? We're going to go to the government and ask to renegotiate. Well, you see what's going on with the PSA right now? It don't seem to be that easy. It might take 2 years. You might get there. But the thing is, again, lack of leadership. Did you explain this to the PSA? Did you explain the reality to the PSA? Because I do find it quite ironic that the head of the PSA is now coming and saying, I don't understand what's going on. I basically saw something like this coming a mile away. Because what was the first post-cabinet press conference of the current administration? If you looked in the eyes of the Prime Minister, you got a very visceral reaction of, things are bad. She said a lot of things to try to not induce panic. We'll find the money, don't worry. Things are bad, but we'll figure it out. But if you looked into her eyes, the genuine emotion in her eyes basically told me, things are bad. I'm shocked that it's that bad. And in that climate, you expect a timely deliverance of 10%? Because the government technically has to figure out, you know, the rest of the government. The UNC was not elected to be the government of the public service unions. It was elected to be the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I guess to some extent, you got slightly mama guide. But to be honest, I wouldn't necessarily blame the government for that. I do think that they have the intention to try to figure out a way to get you 10%. First of all, let's not forget what the Minister of Finance said. It could be 0%. All of a sudden, that throwaway comment has a whole new meaning, right? And again, the lack of communication means instead of nipping this in the bud, now it's at least playing out in public space. Maybe this is the PSA's president's strategy to try to force the situation, right? But things like that could backfire. Hard feelings could now, you know, be generated. Because in our political system, it's not about negotiating, compromise, figuring out everyone's interests. Sometimes you play hardball, sometimes you don't. No, once you start to play hardball, you are viewed as an enemy, potentially. And then you're on the outside looking in all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden, the shiny new PSA president doesn't seem to be that useful to the PSA, if that happens. Also, at the end of the day, not a lot of people might understand you're playing hardball. So there will be some members, as well as members of the public who are not members of the union on the outside looking in. But hey, part of a public display is the court of public opinion, who will look at these utterances and say, well, that's what you get for being naive. Because the PNM were wicked. That's the only reason why it wasn't 10%. The only reason. Don't mind, the current administration has basically hit the pause button on spending until the budget was declared. And even then, we're not necessarily seeing cash just being thrown out of the coffers just like that. So now the chickens have come home to roost, because I guess the expectation was after the budget 10%, after the budget 10%. There's probably a good reason why the Minister of Finance did not put anything in the budget, no allocation for that 10%. He just didn't know how to communicate that in a way that didn't sound bad. But I would imagine to the PSA, if you want to still think that somehow the 10% was always there, money for that. Meanwhile, we don't have enough fire engines. We have issues with financing our health facilities and stocking them with supplies, etc., etc. Government is still behind on paying its bills. They annually owe Tech $1 billion. Because what was your priority? 10%. The priority for the 10% was so strong, reality does not matter. Unfortunately, government cannot exist in a land of desire and make-believe. At some point, they were grounded by reality. Reality slapped them in the face. And they basically, their first post-cabinet press conference at the Red House was to say that reality slapped them in the face. How much of a difficult time they're going to have until certain projects come on stream in 2027, which might not be at the start of 2027. One of our major downstream producers of petrochemical products basically closed up shop because somebody decided we need to go after them for a few $1 million. I don't even want to know what that might have done to the economy. I don't know if it's not as bad or actually worse than the refinery closing, because it's all the trickle-down effect stuff, right? And as well as the current circumstances, it might not, in terms of total dollars and cents, be as bad as the refinery, but given where we are, it might be one of those things where we couldn't really afford any more disruptions to our petrochemical sector. But hey, 10%, good luck with that. Hey, tutor, you want 10% too? Good luck with that. And whoever else wants the 10%, good luck with that. I don't think anybody thought that it would have been a good idea financially to give out 10% right now. What you deserve has to be based on what is there. There are some members of the public service who are paid more than their direct private sector equivalents. To what extent that is true or not, I don't know. I do find it interesting, though, that the union never points things out like that. It's almost as though there might be some inconvenience truth sprinkled in there. Or are we just that devoid of statistical analysis, proper statistical analysis? We're that allergic to it. I don't know. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, oh boy, I said I'll get to the revitalization plan. I guess I'm going to have to jump straight to that. We'll see when we come back. Don't miss it. After this, stay tuned.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore Color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
All right, before we get to the revitalization plan, I do have to bring up some of the updates the crime stories and just a general update to our situation. The main thing, of course, being with regard to the kidnapping. Now, it was reported early in the morning that the victim was found dead, right? Now, we have reports that part of the ransom, half of the ransom, $50,000, was paid. Then his body was found dead, and this is all within apparently less than 24 hours, which, all right, you killed a man, destroyed his truck, which is still technically property, just for $50,000. $50,000 seems like a lot until you stack that up against this is the price for a human life. You ought to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. This is the kind of things you will stoop to just to get $50,000. That's where we reach. But the worst part about it is, based on reports, one of the suspects out of 3 is a police officer. A police officer that apparently has not reported to duty, at least according to one report, for a couple of weeks, right? And again, this is, we're in a state of emergency. And now we have another situation, and again, this is anecdotal, meaning this is one story. This technically doesn't mean that all police officers are kidnappers, right? But I don't. So for your share of $50,000, so this is the thing. These guys, they didn't necessarily do it for $50,000 because they have to split that at least 3 ways based on the assumptions. If these 3 suspects are involved, they're splitting $50,000 3 ways. It could be more. There could be more people involved. For 1/3 of $50,000, you killed somebody. I don't get it. I really don't get it. First of all, it basically says human life to you is that cheap. But second of all, you are going to this length. You are putting yourself in this position where you're committing such a heinous crime just for like $17,000. So when that runs out, you're going to do it again? That's the implication. That the mindset is, if this is how little we view human life, once we've had a month or 2 of our ill-begotten gains, we'll spend that up, then we'll have to go and do it again. Unless there's a bigger conspiracy here. And more importantly, this is the kind of thing that, look, first of all, it is both a negative but also positive. The police, or I believe one of the reports says that senior officers they're distraught over the fact that one of their own has been caught up in this. So yes, it is a negative in the fact that we're in a state of emergency and a police officer is involved in such a heinous crime, kidnapping for ransom, and then killing the victim. So it's almost as though they had no intention to release him at all. That's the implication of the timeline that we're looking at here is so short, right? And a police officer is involved in this nonsense. But then the police were willing. That's where the evidence led to. That's where we go. That's where we go. So kudos to them for that. But there's a third subtle implication there, in that you want to tell me that as a police officer, you botched this thing so badly, you were caught within 48 hours of this? It makes me wonder, even the police don't know what they're doing with regards to crime. That's kind of, then how are we supposed to be confident that, I mean, what, is this an example of a bad police officer? I don't know. I don't know. This whole thing has me very, very upset, right? Because again, the implication was they wanted a ransom, they got half, and then they said, we're just going to kill him and move on. Don't know why, but not only does it cheapen human life, and it speaks to the callousness of the individuals, but it suggests that they never intended him to be released. And now, anyone caught in this situation, any family caught in this situation again, has to consider that. Do I give up the money and then I'll never get my loved one back? Because what's interesting is, if they were going to do this again, who's going to believe them next time? The way how things are going. It just makes no sense all around. It is one of the dumbest crimes, and it very much bothers me that a human life was taken for such stupid reasons. On top of the fact that a human life was just taken. I don't want to say that there was a, I know it might imply that there's a threshold where, oh, well, it's respectable to commit a heinous crime of murder. No, the crime is heinous from the start. That's the starting point. And it just gets worse somehow. It just gets worse somehow with how dumb this whole situation is, how callous this whole situation is. And it's to some extent sickening. Because I hope that that callousness, I mean, we've seen things to suggest that yes, there's a callous view on the value of human life in this country when it comes to crime. But gosh, I don't need such blatant examples, because whereas collateral damage is, well, whoever we hit is whoever we hit, like, I get it, that is callous. That is real callous in a way. But this is intentional. This is potentially intentional callousness, premeditated callousness, planned. Are you okay with being this evil of a human being? Yeah, fine. I'm going to be, and they all said, we're going to be this evil for $50,000. Heaven help us if that is the prevailing mentality of criminals moving forward when the drug money dries up, assuming that things continue on the course that they're going. Now, there's another situation. An off-duty police officer is being interviewed, debriefed over a situation that caused him to shoot and I believe kill an individual who reportedly was in a verbal altercation but had on him a cutlass, right, and a piece of wood, and apparently did not want to de-escalate an argument and wanted to persist in the argument while being thus armed. So the off-duty officer essentially, once the other individual followed the off-duty officer inside and continued the verbal confrontation while brandishing, because I don't think you could have a cutlass and a piece of wood in your pocket or hidden. So while having physically within sight weapons on this person, he continued a verbal confrontation. The officer, this is the limits of what is reported and I assume what is known. The officer drew his pistol and fired at the individual who continued, who followed the officer, I believe, into the yard of his residence to continue the argument. Not just to continue the argument from the street, but went in the yard of the officer to continue the argument. The officer shot at him. The question that is the most pertinent question in this situation is, what exactly happened to trigger the officer's response? Was it necessary to shoot the individual? You draw your gun, the person has a cutlass, depending on distance and body language and a whole host of other factors, you know, is danger, is the threat imminent? Is there enough distance that, look, for him to hit you with the cutlass, it's going to be telegraphed, he's going to have to take a step or two forward, more than enough time to pull the trigger? Was a fatal shooting or shooting warranted? We don't know, because that's the part where I'm not entirely sure. There is no reports of an eyewitness, so that's the part where hopefully we could figure it out. Although I don't know if politics is going to enter into the fray in this. Because I don't think there's a world where once you enter into a man's yard, yes, you might have a piece of wood and a cutlass, but that doesn't automatically mean that he has a right to gun you down. Now, if you are threatening him, yes, it's not with a gun, but hey, I have a gun, you have a cutlass. You threaten me with that, as in I feel I have a reasonable, or it's reasonable for me to think that you are actually going to harm me with that cutlass right now. By all means, I'm going to shoot you. I don't actually have a gun. that's the example. If I had a gun. But if you're on the other end of my yard with a cutlass and a piece of wood, I'm going to shoot you. You're like 10 feet away from me or what have you. And these things do matter because the thing is, these sorts of scenarios, a lot of the public wants well, what are the limits? As though it's very binary. Whereas the reality is, there are multiple factors that change from situation to situation on a case-by-case basis. And we need to know as close as possible to the truth on what happened, because that will help inform the law and potential rulings and thus legal precedents on matters like this. And if we just kind of leave it up in the air and obscure, then the precedents could kind of go in the wrong direction. That's my fear as a non-lawyer. Moving on further, there was a situation where a pit bull mauled a gentleman who had to defend himself and his family. And according to reports or some opinions, he's lucky to be alive because he was mauled particularly a lot on both wrists and hands. And that was potentially within the proximity of major blood vessels. Now, part of the situation is, the aftermath is apparently the victim and his family negotiated with the owner of the pit bull for financial compensation because there was a lack of hope in the judicial system. So rather than go through the motions, and it's going to take 10 to 15 years, or however long it's going to take, who knows if this is going to be prioritized or not, if it'll get anywhere, they all said, look, we just take the financial compensation and move on with our lives. And while I don't know if the owner of the pit bull was deserving of being hit with the full brunt of the law or not, I don't know how culpable he was or was not in this case. I do know that not every situation that's going to be the automatic solution. Okay, it might work here. It might be appropriate here. The victim's family is fine with that here. But this is what they feel. This is how they perceive the system. And dare I say, that is a perception that's across the country. And it's a retired police officer that said this, not a layman that knows nothing about how the criminal justice system works. So, I'll wrap up this part of the show with two things. One, 2 Separate East students were charged with assault. And I believe it was caught on video. So, yeah, that was smart. There are 2 girls, 13 and 15, who are assaulting another female student on a staircase in Separate East Secondary School. And I only bring that up because there's another story in a different newspaper that says the NPTA is urging parents who are seeking school transfers for their children to follow the proper procedures even though the process remains long and bureaucratic. Here's the problem. They're not speaking about, oh, we moved, so we need to move the child, and it's inconvenient with the transportation costs and the times. No, they're speaking about, I believe this whole situation is referencing a bullying situation. A 14-year-old was reportedly bullied in 2023, removed from the school by her mother after the officials in the Ministry of Education, I assume, allegedly failed in the school, allegedly failed to intervene to protect her. The NTA recently became aware of another case in September where the parent applied for transfer and waited weeks for a reply. And the NPT is urging parents to say, no, keep the child in the school. But the problem is not, I'm waiting on the transfer and I don't want the child in school because I just want her out. The problem is, apparently, the schools are not responding appropriately to ensure that the safety of the child is not in risk while the transfer process is ongoing. So there's a part of me that wants to look at the NPT and says, hold on, stop. In what world is this the solution that you came up with to this problem? I'm a parent. My child is being bullied, potentially being bullied violently. There's already on record cases of children having knives, and I believe on record of one student being stabbed. Oh, sorry, multiple issues of students being stabbed, one where a student died. Why do I need to now risk my daughter because the school system can't do its job in a timely manner that would be responsible given the potential severity of the situation? Because if we take bullying seriously, somehow I don't think the appropriate response is, well, it's going to take a while to transfer your child. So in the meantime, ensure that she remains in the same institution that failed to protect her in the first place and is seemingly doing nothing to continue to protect her while this process is ongoing. How does that make sense to a parent? Tell me. Somebody tell me, please. Please make that make sense to me. Make that make sense to me. Of all the positions you're going to take, make that make sense to me. Because not only do you now have to risk the child being physically harmed by the students, but there's also the threat of suicide, which is very real in TNT amongst our young people right now. And the NPTA knows this directly because they're involved in situations to do with this. So how is that responsible? I have no idea. I have no idea. Again, when systems fail, it compounds issues in other areas. The transfer process is probably way too long, way too inefficient, and now it compounds bullying problems. Because in TNT, you know, we jamming still. Your child could be beaten up in a stairwell, but we jamming still. In front of police, by the way. Let's not forget that part early in the week. In front of police. Police can't stop the bullying. But no, keep your child in the school where apparently they're being physically bullied. So, now let's move on. We have to try and get through with regards to the revitalization plan. This is just the preliminary, my take. We'll see as things unfold. Of course, we'll maybe get some comments by Karen tomorrow, as well as maybe have a guest on Thursday to speak on this. It is kind of in the point where, because nothing is necessarily set in stone, it might be a little bit too soon to try to have any strong takes on the matter, but it was presented, and I want to kick off the discussion. So, in order to do so, we'll have the first part of the government's presentation on the whole plan, or at least the whole plan for Trinidad. It's time to cue this.
Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago, our vibrant twin island nation, now emerging as a global logistical hub. We're unlocking new pathways, connecting us to the world, signaling that we are open for business. Today, we proudly unveil the revitalization blueprint designed to usher in a new era of opportunity. Join us now as we walk you through the key projects shaping this exciting new chapter. We begin our journey in the South capital, San Fernando, where transformation takes root and vision becomes reality. Node 1 ignites the revitalization blueprint with 39 catalytic projects, each one a bold step toward a thriving, reimagined Trinidad and Tobago. The key subnodes include Plaza San Carlos, the vibrant waterfront living district blending commercial and residential life, and the pioneering health city. Plaza San Carlos, a journey through time and taste. Step into the heart of heritage at Plaza San Carlos, a beautifully preserved historic market square that pulses with life. Now as the centerpiece of the re-proposed historic district, Plaza San Carlos welcomes the arrival of the last train to San Fernando, a nostalgic tram that glides along the waterfront, offering visitors a scenic and symbolic ride through the soul of the city. This vibrant pedestrian haven is lined with charming colonnades and brims with local flavor, from cozy restaurants and artisanal food stalls to eclectic craft vendors and stylish boutiques. Plaza San Carlos, the soul of the South.
Yesterday I met with sweet Dorothy. She said tomorrow I'm joining in matrimony. And if you act...
Nestled along the serene shoreline, the Waterfront Hotel offers a luxurious escape with breathtaking views, elegant accommodations, and world-class service. Whether you're here for business or leisure, it's the perfect blend of comfort and coastal charm. We honor our island's role as sanctuary to the majestic leatherback turtle. This cutting-edge convention center stands as a living tribute to global connections. The center welcomes international summits, corporate dialogues, and vibrant cultural exchanges, all under one roof.
I slide, and I may never be a bride. right, it is a BBDD.
Wake up to the aroma of breakfast favorites and vibrant local produce. The Alfresco Market is the place to be. From live performances under the stars to weekend yoga and family fun, this dynamic space is the heartbeat of entertainment and activity. Whether you're catching a concert or kicking back with friends, there's always something happening here. The redevelopment of San Fernando's waterfront marks a historic turning point for the city and the wider southern corridor. Transforming a neglected coastal town into southern Trinidad's civic heart, the project promises to catalyze growth in tourism, healthcare, and the cultural economy. This is a cultural and economic renaissance, one that finally grants San Fernando the grand maritime frontage it has long deserved.
For on my mind I had nothing else but romance. I said to myself, boy, you better beat this iron.
Health City, spanning over 14 hectares, will serve as the cornerstone of a visionary precinct dedicated to health and wellness. Encompassing state-of-the-art hospitals, clinics, and medical research centers, it will foster high-skilled employment and attract patients from across the region. This strategic shift from a tourism-centric economy marks a vital step toward building a more resilient and diversified urban future. From San Fernando to Mayaro, the highway extension is forging a vital link to the southeast energy hub at Galeota. From there, we advance westward to Node 3 in Cedros, where upgrades to our Coast Guard facilities and the introduction of customs and immigration services will strengthen our southern gateway. Continuing northwest to Node 4, at Tetron, our Coast Guard headquarters, we complete the arc from shoreline to open sea, fortifying Trinidad and Tobago's coastal border security.
So there was lacking some details with regards to the border security stuff. Like with regards to the Southwest, they're looking to put a security hub in Cedros. So it seems like, and there's photos of the, well, concept photos of the facilities that's being proposed that will integrate Coast Guard, Customs and Immigration, and the Border Protection Unit with regards to border security. So going off now, that was where the government started with their presentation with San Fernando. First of all, I do wonder if that's an AI voice. Could we not have maybe, if this is a presentation of Trinidad and Tobago to the world, I don't know if an international voice was the best marketing choice. But it did sound professional, and we do want it to be a professional presentation. That's fine. There's a lot here to unpack. First of all, you could see why Brian Manning says, hey, this looks like my father's idea. That's initially what I thought when one of the first things they put out is, oh, we're going to put a hotel and a convention center. Now, one of the things that, and a lot of people might not get this, but I actually think this is a good idea. This is not another Hyatt. This is not a little over, well, not a little over, compared to Hyatt's over 400 rooms and Hilton's 400 rooms. This is a 250 room, at least planned hotel. With, you know, a 10,000 seat convention facility, as well as the 250 person amphitheater. I do believe that it suggests we're not trying to make a quantum leap and going too far, like the airport, where you went from tens of thousands of foreign visitors, and by tens of thousands, I think it's like 30,000 foreign visitors a year. Not, I believe, not counting the diaspora for Carnival. Maybe it does, but to the 3 million of the proposed new A&R terminal in Tobago, right? To me, this is more like we have a realistic expectation. Let's have a nice hotel. Let's have a big convention center, because that will allow for a lot more commercial growth. But let's have a nice hotel, not necessarily a large hotel like what the Hyatt is, not necessarily trying to get capacity that we might not need initially. There will always probably be chances then to add to the room stock within San Fernando if tourism in San Fernando kicks off to that extent. One of the things, and this is going to be something that I found interesting, and it did make me wonder, to what extent is all of the residential projects necessary, right? But then I thought this might be how the government is looking to get the capital to the government side of the projects. Now, with regards to the hotel, who owns it will also be interesting because it's adding to government ownership of room stock, where nationally, one could argue the government already owns too much hotels, and it's not really helping the overall situation when the needs of the industry is not more room stock. The needs of the industry is things like marketing, things like more consistent flights, but you need the customers to finance or to meet the demand of the flights, hence we get back to marketing, right? The needs was not airport, technically speaking, but that's my opinion, right? Things like the amphitheater, just being 250 based on amphitheater, that actually could be a big deal if it's managed properly, because it could help be a hub of activity, right, in what could be not just a tourist area, but also a convergence of local commercial interests, but more importantly, to kind of give us a different, I guess you could say, part of arts and entertainment is to provide your population with something beyond just, well, there's the internet and the TV and stuff like that. It helps foster a sense of community. It gives our own artists a space where they themselves can be exposed and potentially grow an industry that not only could be an earner for us, but also will provide more diverse job opportunities. We already have some, but if the industry grew, then we could make use of a highly educated people in that sphere. So there's a lot here to like. With regards to the health facility, I do wonder if that might be a little too much, but I'll get to that when we get to the Port of Spain part of the conversation. One of the things that is said on the website here, and I do believe, I can't remember if the presentation, if the announcement said it, a multimodal transport hub to link land and sea with seamless efficiency, connecting taxis, buses, and marine services, which will probably potentially include things like water taxis, but also could be, you know, with regards to transportation, access to the marina and the like. My thing is this though, it didn't say trains, and one of the things that came up is, well, outside of the historical looking train there for effect rather than for practical transportation, I don't necessarily, or I hope that we're not looking to try to put a rail network down. I have already said, and I won't get into it, but a high-speed, large-scale bus network, not bus stops, right? It's a different model, but it uses larger buses than what we currently even have. For the most part, I do think we have a couple of the buses of that size, but even then, they might not be quite fit for that purpose, not quite large enough. And it's how you do the infrastructure for that. You don't necessarily have to put rail down, you're just putting road down. What that means is in times of emergency, those road networks reserved for buses, and it's not just another priority bus route, but a purpose-built road network for buses or priority, could then be utilized by emergency services if there's an emergency, right? So, but also I do believe it'll be cheaper than rail. A lot of countries in South America, let me not say a lot, but countries in South America have gone that route and seemingly gone that route successfully. And that's something we could start to implement right now. We don't necessarily need to do a lot of construction for that. So giving San Fernando some love, I do think matters because we need to develop more than just in the Port of Spain area and jam everything up in there. So to what extent we could successfully divest government services, because this will be the regional center for health services, but more on that in a bit. Let's go to the second video, which I believe will be centered around Port of Spain. Let's go. I did that.
Revitalization Node 5, Port of Spain ascends. North Trinidad's capital city is stepping boldly into the future. As part of the revitalization blueprint, 38 projects will unfold across Port of Spain. Our north capital will showcase architectural excellence, a state-of-the-art multimodal hub, new port city and industrial estate, specialized health city, a waterfront worthy of a nation's pride. Every project is designed to honor our island's natural beauty while unlocking its potential. Port of Spain's waterfront will become a symbol of progress, pride, and possibility. The revitalized foreshore will unveil a new standard of coastal living, featuring premium waterfront residences, sophisticated apartments offering panoramic sea views and seamless access to the city's vibrant edge. A dynamic retail promenade, a curated mix of boutiques, cafes, and culinary gems, thoughtfully arranged along a breezy boardwalk. A cultural and creative pulse, more than a destination, it's a living canvas of coastal charm, local flair, and everyday indulgence. Anchoring the waterfront skyline, this visionary development seamlessly integrates a global financial center with a state-of-the-art international convention center, creating a dynamic nexus for commerce and collaboration. Rising alongside are iconic hotel towers offering world-class hospitality, complemented by 2,000 luxurious waterfront residences that redefine urban living. With over 200 marina berths, the Invaders Bay Marina invites a vibrant maritime culture, positioning the destination as a premier hub for business and leisure. The Infinity 8 Towers. Embodying endless possibility, graceful balance, and the promise of renewal. Their name evokes the elegant arc traced by a hummingbird's wings, an eternal dance of motion and meaning, inspired by one of Trinidad and Tobago's most beloved creatures. Moving along the waterfront, we introduce you to our state-of-the-art convention center. Gracefully anchored on the breathtaking waterfront, our architecturally iconic, state-of-the-art convention center redefines Caribbean excellence, where visionary design converges with extraordinary experiences. A vibrant waterfront community awaits. On the western shoreline, this thoughtfully designed waterfront residence offers elegant low-rise buildings rising just 4 to 5 stories. Green spaces and recreational parks and pedestrian-friendly streetscapes. A 30,000 square foot cruise terminal hosting 3 post-Panamax cruise ships. Designed to welcome over 1 million visitors annually. It redefines Trinidad and Tobago's gateway to the world. A new gateway for efficient, comfortable, and accessible transport. Connecting communities and harmonizing land, sea, and rail for fluid movement. Swift, radiant, and impossibly light, the hummingbird dances through the landscape, inviting passengers to greet each day with eyes wide to possibility. It is a symbol of hope in motion, a thread of joy woven into the nation's rhythm. The re-engineered port facility integrates dry docking and advanced warehousing infrastructure with light manufacturing zones, a cutting-edge training and simulation center, regulatory offices, and a dedicated union headquarters. Designed for efficient operations and seamless logistics, the port city positions Port of Spain as the Southern Caribbean's premier transshipment hub, where global trade meets local innovation. See Lots Industrial Park and Free Trade Zone. Modernized port governance hub with enhanced operational efficiency. An international health city in Port of Spain will feature state-of-the-art towers dedicated to diabetes, oncology, cardiac, and clinical services. These will also host a world-class training center positioning Trinidad and Tobago as a regional leader in medical education and care. By fostering the exchange of knowledge and expertise among healthcare professionals and enabling collaboration with renowned international medical institutions, this initiative promises to be a transformative asset for our nation's health sector and global standing. As part of our blueprint, we're enhancing the Queen's Park Savannah with respectful, legacy-honoring upgrades that unlock its full potential. The capital is entering a bold new chapter, re-envisioning its waterfront and urban gateways into a vibrant, connected coastal district.
So, with regards to the healthcare situation, there seems to be 2 hubs, one in San Fernando intended, one in Port of Spain, a further build-up of what already exists. You saw Port of Spain General, you saw the current ministry building there, right, in the presentation. The thing is, both seemingly are not just there to help provide better healthcare and more specialized services to the citizens of TNT, but also both seem to be there for medical education and medical tourism. And there's a part of me that wonders, I don't know what the timeline is going to be, if they're both going to be attempted to be constructed at the same time. You know, to what extent should we do one and then the other, because we could kind of learn from the first one to kind of figure out the second one, but that's juxtaposed by the needs of, say, both areas with regards to the actual healthcare they provide. But things like medical tourism, do we really need two areas where it's centered around? I'm not entirely sure, right? It might not necessarily be a bad thing, however, because again, you might not be able to fit everything in one facility, even though in Port of Spain they call it a health city. And I think in San Fernando, it's also called a health city. Now, technically, it's not literally as big as Port of Spain or as big as San Fernando. But again, in this project, you see on the foreshore and with regards to Invaders Bay, or at least parts of Invaders Bay, residential projects. And I do suspect the residential projects, because this is one of the things, particularly when you get to the sea lots area, who is the development for? Who is going to benefit? And obviously, no one is going to think that it's going to be low-income housing. It's going to be higher end. How high, I'm not entirely sure. But when you want to do things like put a cruise ship terminal and a international financial center in the middle of all of these things, you expect it to be high end. The thing is, a lot of this is predicated on two things, or really one thing, really, reclaiming land. Reclaiming land around Invaders Bay, and then you see in the concept art, it isn't just the residences, but they have the water shield. I don't know why the term is escaping me, listen. But essentially to shield the residents from, you know, the tides and stuff, breakwater or what have you. And then also with the port facility, part of what's going to give them the room to do all these things with cruise ships and multimodal transport hubs is to basically remove the port of Spain from where it is, and similar to what Japan did, I think Tokyo did with its airport, basically build an island in the Gulf of Paria right off the coast in order to put the port facility, which will, in theory, since you're making this reclaimed island, you know, for this specific purpose, it will have enough space, right, to not necessarily be in the current situation we're in, where we're limited by how much land is available to the port. There is no more land to expand, really, right? So by doing so, the cruise ship terminal now, that could go where the current port of Spain is, as well as certain other parts of the transport infrastructure. So you have this port facility that's out in the sea. I do also imagine it potentially would help with dredging, because part of the situation is, you know, we do have to worry about dredging and the like. The ferry terminal might be a redo, a renovation, not just a renovation, but a rebuild at the site more or less where the current ferry terminal is, not too far from where Hyatt is, right? So Hyatt will basically be in between a new ferry terminal and what I believe to be the cruise ship terminal, right? And as well as the waterfront residences. So there's a lot that they want to do with the waterfront. Moving the port, I guess, makes sense. This is going to cost a lot of money, and I don't necessarily know if the residential part and that commercial aspect of it is going to be enough. Now, the question is, will the port have to be in a government-to-government partnership or a public-private partnership, which means we might not fully own the port wholly. But the flip side of that is, yeah, that might make us feel uneasy, but if we do get a better port that could become a serious transshipment hub for trade in the region, will the benefits outweigh the risks? There you see the multimodal hub next to the old lighthouse and the ferry terminal. I believe that might not require necessarily reclaiming land there. That might be how the land more or less goes contours, right? Okay, there's rail in the multimodal hub. It is what it is. I would prefer buses, but that doesn't mean financially rail might work. Rail might work, right? And now you're seeing, and I don't know if this was intentional, but I'm seeing a potential vision here. You have a multimodal hub in San Fernando. You have a multimodal hub in Port of Spain. So now those two cities are not necessarily connected directly, But you have the beginnings of a wider, large-scale national transportation network that could help alleviate our traffic problem. And of course, San Fernando has a proposed highway going east to connect to the southeastern point of the country. That logistically could then be further expanded, not just for the oil and gas sector, but for other benefits as well. So if you connect the whole country together, right, and that might, again, how do we finance all of this? Here's the key thing, capital. Yeah, we could raise the capital, but what about maintaining all of these nice things, which to some extent, having a public-private partnership or government-to-government partnerships might actually work out for us. We won't necessarily have to deal with all of the maintenance ourselves. Will this be part of an arrangement with China or some other country, Belt and Road, India? I don't know. With regards to sea lots, that might be where some of the more controversial aspects are going to be. I do believe Movie Town, everything will be built around Movie Town and Invaders Bay, right? But with regards to sea lots, to what extent will people be relocated in order for this to work, in order for this to happen? Because what they want to do is, they want to put a commercial industrial zone mainly for warehousing and distribution, not so much for manufacturing. But the point is, it's going to be the area where the new proposed port is going to meet the actual land of TNT. That's where the goods are going to essentially come through. Land on the port, go to this hub where there'll be warehouses controlled by whichever commercial business who will then distribute it as they see fit. How much sea lots residents are going to be relocated? What is the potential compensation for this? I don't have any issue as long as they're compensated. But what about those that don't want to move? When China built the business stadium, there were some highly controversial relocation practices. I'll say that. Are we going to see some less than ethical practices with regards to this? It seems as though they don't want to move, but as long as the compensation is fair, I don't think I have an issue with it, because at the end of the day, yes, the residents might complain, progress for who? But we're not going to put high-rise condos where your homes are. They're looking to have an economic development. This is national now, and potentially to give us a stronger position internationally between the financial center near Invaders Bay, the Hummingbird Towers, no, the Infinity Towers, sorry, and this port. These are things that people have said, why can't we have it? Now, the problem is, just because you build a thing doesn't mean that all of a sudden global trade is going to come through us and international financial transactions and the like are going to come through us. So this is just building the buildings and the potential infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily speak to how do you make these projects work. That's one of the reasons why a lot of this is in its infancy. So to say that we're going to know for sure and be able to critique the actual plans for sure, there's going to be a lot on the back end that we need to find out in order to know if this makes sense or not. Of course, there's more to this. It's not just Port of Spain and San Fernando. We have a third clip. Let's run the clip.
A formidable 40-acre national security campus will dominate Mount Hope, unified, strategic, and built for purpose. It will centralize vital operations, eliminate fragmentation, and elevate Trinidad and Tobago's readiness to respond, protect, and prevail. Advancing our focus on national security, we commence Node 7. Tamana, Center for Justice. Moving to the Eastern Plains, the Tamana Prison Campus resides, the largest single infrastructure project in national security history. We have consolidated the existing correctional facilities and proposed redevelopment of the land for mixed-use purposes. This facility will be home to courthouses, prison and on-site residences with rehabilitation programs for the successful inmate reintegration. Tamana, a Center for Justice. Next, we shift our focus onto the Remand Yard, Port of Spain, a cornerstone of our revitalization narrative. Once a symbol of confinement, the Boys Jail now stands as a beacon of possibility. Emerging from this will be an arts and cultural center as a dynamic exhibition and events hall. It offers facilities for workshops, conferences, and cultural exchange. This bold transformation honors the past while empowering the future, where creativity, collaboration, and community take center stage. With the forthcoming integration of Carrera Prison into the Tamana program, a strategically positioned islet has emerged as available for redevelopment. This unlocks an exceptional opportunity to create a world-class vacation enclave envisioned with private bungalows, a serene marina, and an elegant boutique hotel designed to captivate discerning travelers. From isolation to inspiration. With the successful consolidation of the Tamana Justice Campus, a remarkable opportunity now unfolds, 280 acres of prime land poised for transformation. This isn't merely excess space, it's a blank canvas for national advancement. We envision a vibrant fusion of residential and commercial development that will serve our people and ignite regional prosperity. From welcoming homes to bustling enterprises and inclusive community spaces, every square foot will be shaped with intention. Node 10 highlights Caroni. A modern racetrack, multi-use recreational and cultural venue awaits. We are proud to unveil Node 11, the central government campus. The aim is to decentralize ancillary government services by relocating them from our bustling capital city to Chaguanas. The CGC will not only host several key ministries like sports and culture, it will also feature a multifunctional event amphitheater. Additionally, the campus will incorporate the Energy Tower. This development will serve as our new central capital city. A nation shaping its future with purpose, one development at a time. Trinidad and Tobago, a global hub, connecting us to the rest of the world.
So now, again, at every stage, there is a residential project as things are relocated. And of course, you have another hotel, and this is, again, a smaller project. So I'm not so bothered as, per se, some of the larger scale efforts, right? And taking now a former prison, making it a tourist attraction, as well as putting a new boutique hotel down the islands, this kind of, again, makes sense. It's part of the culture of TNT. It could open things up in the various boating industries on that side of the island, help further with economic development on the western tip, right? As well as giving access to tourism to just a part of the island that might not be that readily apparent, right? Similar to how we have a hotel in Maracas. Now, of course, not just Port of Spain, not just San Fernando and the like. Also, again, taking the situation in Chaguanas, putting now more government services central. These are things that I've said before, things to try to help alleviate some of the traffic situation, because now you don't have to go to Port of Spain to get certain things done, and the people working in those ministries don't have to live in Port of Spain or travel from wherever in the country to Port of Spain in order to do their jobs. Now, with regards to the national security complex, this is one of the things where, especially at this part, I had the thought, because there's no commercial generation of revenue from a national security complex, right? It is a net negative financially, but in the, or rather direct negative drain, because the benefits are indirect. You don't earn money from it. And this is one of the things where, depending on the size and scope of it, it seems to be pretty huge. Now, again, if you want to take national security seriously, we do have to invest in it somewhat. Is it too much? Because just maintaining the buildings alone, I would argue, is a question when we have an issue maintaining the current infrastructure that we have with regards to the police headquarters, as well as police stations, fire stations, and the like. So this is one of those areas where the recurring expenditure, not just the capital expenditure, it makes me wonder, because with all of these residential properties, yes, they're going to be high-end. People are going to complain they're for the rich. But the flip side is they give us the capacity to afford all of these plans. I suspect the price is not just going to be high, but there's going to be some version of property tax on these sorts of properties, on these sorts of developments, right? Or some sort of ongoing maintenance fee in order to keep these things maintained, right? The common areas, the streets, the infrastructure, water, et cetera, not just the utility bills, but in order to keep all of those things maintained. Now, also again, there seems to be a bit of emphasis on trying to get certain entertainment industries going. So there's this new arts and culture center and restaurant and lounge in the Golden Grove, well, the former site of the Golden Grove prison. I don't necessarily know how smart that is, just because parking. What are you going to do with parking there? The site is not that big, and the more you want to put on this site, the less available space that it has. It's not as though Port of Spain is just bustling with parking. I know there's parking facilities. Are there enough nearby? This is one of the things that Port of Spain itself probably needs to figure out, right? Hopefully not at the expense of our cultural heritage, old buildings that are still remaining that ideally we would like to keep. But the racetrack in Carney, that seems to be a horse racing track. I guess I'm not a fan of horse racing. I can't say how good or bad it is, and there's not a lot of details on that. But again, the site of the former maximum security prison, I believe that's the new, that would be for the new residential development, the Golden Grove Commons. Again, this is probably a way to finance, because the private sector probably could do a lot of this, right? All of the residential stuff, the private sector could do. Hell, I wouldn't necessarily mind if there's private sector stake and ownership in the hotels proposed. Because again, government having sole ownership and liability, we don't necessarily see government following through with regards to investment in the tourism sector from a government level, just from a hotel level, right? So if this is a sign that they're looking to invest in marketing and stuff, well, fine, but otherwise, I don't know how much I like the government having full liability for these projects. With regards to these residential projects, this could all be commercially, you know, proposals. Commercial entities could build them, could sell them, could profit off of them, but we, of course, get our cut, which then finances the thing like the whole Golden Grove prison. Well, not the Golden Grove prison, the new Tamina prison campus. Now, with regards to that, stakeholders seem to like the new Tamina prison complex, but there have been two reports with regards to the Prison Officers Association, right, on this. One of them basically saying that the benefits of a centralized prison campus is unproven. Now, I'll say this. When you look at the whole prison complex proposal, you see juvenile, you see, I believe it's something, the equivalent of general population, and you see maximum security. I don't know how I feel based on the concept art with maximum security being so close to everybody else, right? But then also, to what extent will this new prison facility help alleviate the primary issue with the prisons? And it's not that the facilities are obsolete and in a dilapidated state. It's the fact that the inmates are running the asylum. And if the inmates are in the asylum, and it's one centralized facility, and you not only have maximum security, but juveniles on the same compound, what could possibly go wrong? And I'm not saying that with only sarcasm. There's some sarcasm there. But I am saying that in the sense of there can be some unintended consequences here, right? I don't know if I like maximum security being that close to everything else, right? And to what extent now, I mean, hopefully there will be some land for growth. I do feel having maximum security located as far away as practically possible to the court facilities, juvenile, as well as all the work programs. But that's just me. I'm a little bit paranoid. It is what it is. So overall, what I think, this is a lot. This is a lot to consider. I do like the fact that it's ambitious, actually. I do like the fact that they intend to do a lot. The problem is, if you are too ambitious with your intentions, you might actually end up in a situation where you overcommit, you overextend, and things kind of get bad. To what degree did Mr. Manning, he had too many plans that he was trying to force through at once, not just with the construction, but also with the criminal justice system. And at the end of the day, he had to call a snap election, right? We ended up having to rebuild the grandstand. What is intended for the Savannah, I myself, I'm not entirely sure. It's not clear with that concept art, right? Although making something that will be a bit more interesting, modern, and something that will draw. You see, an airport should not be a tourist attraction, but the center for your carnival experience, as well as other cultural activities in the Queen's Park Savannah, that should be a tourist attraction, right? Napa technically could be a tourist attraction, but we didn't really, that's not really well thought out. I don't know if it could be ever properly, fully fixed with some of the practical issues with literally just how the building is built and how it limits certain things. But a lot of these projects, they're aimed at beautifying the nation, potentially restructuring things to make it better organized, right? As well as trying to up the efficiency and infrastructure of the available area, like with transportation, as well as available facilities for entertainment. So there's a lot here to unpack, but the problem is ultimately, if you build it, doesn't mean they will come. So for everything now, whether these things are going to be successful or not depends on the end user. For the prison facility, it's the prison service. For the national security complex, it's the Ministry of the various ministries of national security, if the split continues to exist, right? For the waterfront, residential things, financial center, port, etc., it's all on those commercial activities and the end users. The medical complexes, the Ministry of Health, the public health system, etc., etc. And if we don't necessarily now get stakeholder input, not stakeholder input that have their own agenda, I want to try to find a way to get their cut of the pie. And we need to try and figure out a way to get that out of the system too. Although that's hard, that's everywhere, that's in other countries. Well, like just take the proposed hotels, the cruise ship terminal, and the various entertainment spaces, right? It's not as though every person in tourism and arts and culture knows what they're doing. But to some extent, the government has proven that they don't necessarily have institutional knowledge when it comes to these things. So to get stakeholders, to identify the right ones who will understand the bigger picture, that it's more than just about whatever their little projects are, their solo work is, but rather it's for the industry as a whole and go further for the nation, to ensure that these initiatives have a chance. You spend money, you spend initial capital, you make a thing, it's not necessarily going to turn a profit initially. You're going to have some working capital, some startup capital there to keep it going. But you need to, that doesn't mean you could waste the first few years. You need to get the operations up for a lot of these things, hit the ground running, so that the public, the consumer, will see it as a worthy product to spend their money on. And the better it is, the more impact it will have with tourism. You don't want some dog and pony show that is half professional, semi-professional, and really like barely anything worth anything. You want your best foot forward when it comes to trying to get the foreign market to really look at it in a big way, not some quaint little small line, a little strippiness, but rather to the best of our ability, which is there. But it's not just building the thing. But Napa also shows that it's not also just building a thing to deliver. if there were stakeholders involved with NAPA from the beginning, certain deficiencies in its design could have potentially been eliminated before construction was finished. One main deficiency, I don't know if it was practical, right? But NAPA is a very good example of you don't just build a thing and hand it off. You need to get stakeholder, end user input from the beginning to ensure that there isn't something that you're just missing that might be critical. Diego Martin in line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, and to all your listeners. Changing, and I apologize for changing your discussion on future economic development. I want to focus on what you started to talk earlier today. And I'm going basically to agitate for the reconstruct of the TTPS. We are continue to make excuse with respect to the performance of the TTPS. I believe it's time now the police, this commission has to act. The TTPS itself has to act. The whole third layer, excluding the new commissioner of police, has to be looked at and be, I suspect, be removed. Continue to make more excuses of what we have been seeing for the last 10, 15 years. Kidnapping, murder, it is unbearing now. You imagine you have depots being robbed Sunday morning. You imagine Mr. Lala, who was kidnapped and killed. That is one of the most heinous crimes. Coupled with all of that, you have 3 instances of policemen allegedly involved in heinous crime, the kidnapping. The one that in Superior where he shot his neighbor, the policeman who had I think a garage, a maintenance garage. And then the really heinous one, it was close to the Prime Minister's house, the invasion where we had imitation police. Now, you can't say if it's real or imitation because they haven't arrested anybody. So I'm putting it on the face of the TTPS. Too many excuses. I'm going to juxtapose that, and you know my favorite topic is the day of policing, where those senior officers who are now on the executive of the police was silenced with respect to the protest. Let's juxtapose that to ASP Ananda's victory in the court. What he said he was he might have been victimized. He didn't call name in newspaper article. How can he function if people in authority did that to him? And juxtapose that to the judgment, where the judge said, if you don't choose people that are basically the best based on meritocracy, you will have hierarchy in the police service that are basically populated with incompetent people, incompetent senior officers, and you could name them. You have DCP INI, you have DCP administration, all of those people have serious judgment about them. Is it because they have no knowledge of it, or they just basically don't want to do the job? And I believe they have basically faithful to Peter's principle. And if Peter's principle, we elevate people who are incompetent. So I am agitating for a complete construct of the TTPS, particularly the leadership of the police, to move us out of this morass we are in. And for me, and by extension, the whole of Trinidad to be feeling safe and secure. The police service is not doing that. And we have to start by asking ourselves if the current police service commissioners are up to the job. Have they been able to identify weaknesses in the police service? And I say not because they are not acting, and it's to get rid of them forthwith and start building again the police service. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Well, I think part of the problem is, and I don't know, because again, that judge statements on the need for promoting via meritocracy is a big deal. Now, one could argue that the industrial court is far too labor friendly, and indirectly, I won't say directly, and maybe I'm wrong to say indirectly, but I believe it's not intentional, so indirectly unintentionally supports the whole tenure, because that's the precedent, that's the norm, that's the expectation, and not always properly ensures within their rulings that meritocracy is carried out, right? That's my impression, right? Not to say that they're trying to undermine the concept of meritocracy, and in fact, they might actively try to promote it, but some of their rulings potentially, and they're limited by the law and they're limited by also the evidence presented, and usually I think they mean well and they are making good decisions if you just look at the evidence. But people know how to game the system, and that's really where the issue is. It's not so much the judges. It's that the system, hey, this is how the court rules in matters like this if we frame it like that and present evidence of this and have evidence of that, right? Now, and that, to some extent, potentially affects the police service too, if I am correct in that theory. Now, I think you're right, basically, right? I don't know to what extent you could rebuild, restructure the police service wholesale, but major changes in accountability, transparency, and rehabilitation of the service, and this goes beyond public perception. It's not about making the public perception of the service rehabilitated, it's about making the service itself improved with regards to things like this. Because that trust and confidence thing, I think we need to realize, or the people in power need to realize, look, you can't be taking it for granted. So, this is where major legislative changes probably need to happen, because the current system basically means if you have issues with the police executive, tough. Good luck with that. You already have an issue with the Police Service Commission, and you have an issue with the police executive. And the way how it's built, I don't know to what extent, if you solve the Police Service Commission, it'll solve the executive issue. However you view the executive, what the issue to be. But right now, both of those situations are questionable at best. And they're compounding each other potentially, or one is compounding the other, right? So do you need to make changes in both, make changes in one? I'm not entirely sure. But we have reached the point now where we're stuck with an executive that people don't have faith in. And sometimes, it's not fair, but sometimes when it comes to leadership positions, if the people in the organization don't have faith in you, and if the public don't have faith in you, and this could be a business, a sports team, a public institution, a police service. If the people all around, outsiders and insiders, don't have faith in you, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job, you can't function in your job. And then an argument could be made, we need to move on from you for the good of the organization, for the good of the mission. So it doesn't matter with regards to DCP Martin, DCP Benjamin, Junior Benjamin, and Natasha George, I believe is the other DCP. It doesn't matter how good they are and how capable they are. If the public perception is against them, and to be fair, internal public perception is different to the external public perception. But because this is a police service, the external perception, I believe, matters a lot. They just don't say it enough, whatever it is. We just don't participate in the democratic process enough, whatever it is. But I do think that it is difficult to say, oh no, everything is fine and we are going to be good with the team that we have, because when the public does not have a high opinion of them, it's difficult then for you to rehabilitate the public perception of the whole service when the leadership, that perception is already sunk, at least with regards to the other parts of the executive. The commissioner, he is new, he wasn't part of the issue, so he is insulated from the past, not necessarily going forward in the future. So the whole situation, you see, the problem is you could go too far, swing the pendulum too far, and then all of a sudden now you have more political interference in the police service. than even now. Although one could argue we already have too much, so how bad could it be? This is where leadership is required. Leadership in order to help, first of all, identify the problem properly, get practical solutions, assess them on a proper level, not on a what's the best optically for us in this moment level, and then figure out a way to communicate its implementation, to get buy-in for its implementation so you can implement it smoothly. Do we have that capacity within our political environment? I would argue no, regardless of who's in power. San Fernando line, good morning, caller, on air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Sean, this, what you would call it, this plan that the government has to revamp Trinidad and Tobago, let me put it that way. With all these, this is 139 projects. Let me say this about this Kamana Prasad-Bissessa government. In the last Kamana Prasad-Bissessa government, how many major projects did they take on? And how many of those projects were completed? What would come to mind is the highway to Point 14. And that project was not completed. One project. It tells me that they're still taking us for fools in this country. The government still taking its citizens for fools. I thought I would have seen something with serious economic sense. I thought I would have seen them try to revitalize that project that they signed on to, the library ship repair facility. They took money from this company, and up to now we can't resolve that. I thought I would have seen some plans to revitalize Chaguaramas dry docking facility, to start back repairing ships in Chaguaramas as well, to put the citizens to work, serious engineering work, and to bring in serious money to this country. I thought I would have seen those type of things. After revamped projects, some of those projects, I could name some projects that were initiated in the 80s, that they dust off and put some AI on it and have it looking nice. We need serious governance in Trinidad and Tobago. People who have serious ideas to take this country forward. And I know I didn't see that in that entire showcase that they had there. That entire showcase was a farce as far as I'm concerned. I didn't see any agricultural projects inside there.
Well, there's one.
Imagine we planning to build a massive prison.
There's one connected to the prison facility, technically. Technically, it's connected to the prison facility. For what it's worth. Or we get connectivity.
I didn't hear you, Sean, sorry.
Sorry, I just saying, technically connected to the prison facility is like an agricultural work project, I think. That's the closest we got.
Yes, so no, I'm saying this, we are planning a massive prison facility now. A massive prison facility in this country.
Yep.
So we expected more crime, and we expecting a bigger prison population then. This is ludicrous. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I'm not too sure how much bigger it is than the current maximum security prison facility, right? Because again, if you take Carrera and the remand yard and so on, and you put it together, because they also want to put a court facility there. So that's the thing, right? Now again, you kind of touched on a point where I didn't necessarily, I wanted to try and maybe be positive, but yeah, there's a lot of questions on where the money coming from. And a lot of people want to say Carl maybe shouldn't ask that question. He shouldn't ask that question. because all the issues we have with money comes from how they handle the economy. But not all of it, though. A major part of the lack of revenue, I would argue, is the external shocks. Within that constraints, though, you could still criticize the previous administration, right? But to say that we would have had money to just throw about willy-nilly, no, we might have been more stable, more comfortable, and we would have potentially had better growth prospects if the economy was managed better. But to say that we will be wealthy, I don't know if we want to go that far. And that goes to Mr. Sanfano's point. These are some big dreams. And it does seem a little bit pie in the sky-ish, unless a lot of the private sector consumerism part of it is going to be really high-end. And then now, I don't know how the country is going to take it, because it's going to go further along that concern of the sea-loss residents, and possibly amongst others, changes for who? Development for who? And part of accepting changes is it changes for me. But if I'm on the outside looking into all these changes, is it really for me? Or is it for the blessed few? And this is where leadership comes in. Because I think now, first of all, to some extent, the Republicans, they try to do too much too quickly in a different way, but it's getting them in trouble now. And to what extent are we going to see something philosophically similar, but technically in a different way in things like this? Because, look, one, if you want to tell me, trust in the government, they have smart people, they know what they're doing, they, you know, whatever. I mean, Mr. Sanfano said these are some old ideas. Hey, they have some old PNM ministers in this government, right? The thing is, I don't know who said 10% to the PSA, who promised them that, despite the fact that Minister Tanku said it could be 0%. But that's potentially suggests, so I'm kind of being redundant here, but potentially suggests that is there capacity for realistic economic planning and budgeting of these large-scale projects? And potentially that answer is no, because you promised something on the campaign trail that you didn't know if you could deliver or not, and then you did not even have the capacity, at least of yet, to properly explain the situation and justify where we started, we promised you 10%, so where we are now, something doesn't feel right from the PSA president. Right? It was almost as though you all willfully wanted to operate in an alternative economic reality, and now that you won the election, you are yanked from that alternative reality into the prime universe of what is, and what is not there, is not enough. And you get what you get. And dare I say, if you did that just for one small aspect, relatively speaking, it's a lot of money, but it's just with regards to aspects of governance, that's one aspect of it. Now, how does that translate with regards to the mentality, the capacity for strategic thinking and analysis when it comes to planning for things like this? Let's take the comment quick before we close out. We always have police saying it is an emergency and using the proposed roads designated for buses. That is why I propose monorail or overhead suspended rail. And don't forget overhead cable cars that take us over the northern range from Tunapuna to Maracas. Okay, the overhead cable cars, that, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of money and maintenance issues. Here's the thing. The issue you have here is not that it's roads. The issue you have here is the police being irresponsible. Solving it, what your proposed solution is not to solve the problem, it's to compensate for the problem. It's to compensate for the problem. That's my thing. Now, granted, I am of a more idealistic position than you. So perhaps I am having too high of an expectation of my fellow Trinbagonians. But I do think in this case it's warranted. Because if we had proper police accountability and transparency and discipline, this would be less of a problem, potentially to the point where it isn't a problem. But unfortunately, look, it's not just on designated for buses, it's just on the roadways. How many officers do we believe are flashing blue lights because they don't want to be in traffic? They themselves are taking a very wrong solution to the problem of traffic congestion. So you see, it depends on the economics. If it doesn't matter whether you use rail or buses, fine, because it might potentially open up certain things like what you're saying there, right? Certain designs might be opened up. I don't necessarily know about the overhead rail cars that go to Napuna to Maracas, but maybe some other alternative might work, just because maintenance and, I don't know, tropical climate, overhead rail. But if buses are significantly cheaper than rail, I would still go with buses. And then the thing is, the additional benefits to those roadways, it might be tangential, it might be, secondary, but it's still there, right? But the issue you have at the top, that's what Mr. Diego Martin was speaking about. The issues with the police service being entitled and basically acting a fool on a daily basis in full view of the public, right? They're basically doing what Dr. Rowley said not to do during COVID. They're jacking up the scene. He said a different term. We'll close with that, unless we have another comment. No, we don't. We'll close with that, folks. Thank you for humoring me with regards to the San Fernando, well, not the San Fernando, with regards to the revitalization plan. Mr. San Fernando has some strong opinions. Because of the lack of details, I can't say that he's wrong to have those concerns. And in fact, regardless of how it turns out, he is right to have those concerns now, to ask those questions now, to try and get answers now, because potentially now is the time. You don't have complaints at the end when you can't change anything. And this could be a situation where there's too much overreach and overextension, not just in the amount of projects that will probably be simultaneous, because as he pointed out, it's over 130 projects that they want to get done technically in 9 years, because it's going to start in the middle of next year, right? And they're not guaranteed to have any time afterwards. So I want to say it's more realistic to say 9 years or 8.5, 130 plus projects to get done. And even if they somehow manage to finance all these things, implement them properly, and get it all rolling and operational, they have to be maintained. And that's where the other aspect of overreach and overextension could be. If we grow too fast, that happens to businesses all the time, that you can't sustain it, businesses fold up, and the contraction might be even worse than where we are currently. With that said, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Never forget it's nice to be nice. Stay safe. Hopefully, we will see each other. I don't think they had a lot of murders within the last 24 hours, but it's just one of those things. Do whatever you can do to help keep yourself safe. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN